This is the Phoenix family. You can see Joaquin right there in the middle. And he has 3 sisters, and he had a brother. River, there on the left, died of an overdose when he was 23 at the Viper Room. Actually, Joaquin and another one of his sisters were there. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Johnny Depp. There were a couple other famous people that were there when it happened. But yeah, I want to talk about his family. I actually was going to do this on Summer Phoenix because on my Nina and Randa video where I talk about how they were quote-unquote vegans since birth and they have no hips and they probably will never be able to have children. People are like, oh, well, Summer Phoenix. Summer Phoenix not only has hips, but she has 2 children. And so I had to look her up. And sure enough, yeah, she looks like a typical woman. And she has 2 kids. She has 2 boys, actually. And I would just put this out there really quickly that the oldest, it looks like his shoulders aren't very broad, but, you know, who knows what's going on. I'm not going to remark too much on the children because I couldn't even find Liberty's children. Her other sister, she has another sister named Liberty, and she has somewhere between 3 and 5 kids. It was really like, Wikipedia says 5, and then other places say 3. So anyway, she has kids. They're the only ones in the family who have kids. So it's, they have another sister, Rain, and then, you know, Joaquin. And so, yeah, those 2, Liberty and Summer, have kids. So I should say Summer, or I guess the younger ones, were the only ones that were, quote-unquote, vegan since birth. And I want to talk about that a little bit because, I mean, it looks like her body composition is somewhat normal. You know, people would probably remark that, oh, she doesn't have a very curvy body or anything like that. But, you know, a lot of women don't nowadays. We end up with smaller breasts, more narrow hips, and this is just part of it. But I think people will be really impressed when we start seeing 3rd and 4th generation vegans. And we see that those people can have kids. And they look, you know, above normal. They look beautiful. They look great. They have, you know, well-developed bodies and faces. I think that's when people are going to be really impressed. So right now, all we've got is a handful of people that we can point to and say, well, they've been vegan since birth and they've got kids. Firstly, I would say there are going to be some people that can, you know, convert these nutrients from plants optimally. So, yeah, I mean, we can't just say nobody can do this. There are clearly people that can do it better. I don't know if it's because genetically they're designed, their ancestors have eaten this way, you know, largely carbohydrates. And so, yeah, there are people that do better on an exclusively or mostly plant-based diet. And what the percentage is of the population, you know, if I had to guess, I would say maybe like 10-20% of people can eat that way and still, you know, sustain themselves for decades or, you know, maybe even their whole life, who knows. But it's not a large amount of people. And furthermore, I would say it would just make sense that we would see people that seem to be doing well, eating that way. So yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, being able to point to 1 or 2 or just a handful of people doesn't really mean much to me. You know, it's when we see very, very large numbers of people that can do this, that's going to be impressive. And it's definitely not everybody. It's not even half of, you know, all of the population that can eat this way. Guarantee it, because we would not see this many ex-vegans. We would see people that, you know, could do it. They would have stuck to it if they could have done it. So the second reason that I think a lot of people can grow up this way and still maintain health leads me to this comment where she was being interviewed, and she said, I did raise my kids vegan. They're 8 and 11 now, and definitely have begun to make their own dietary choices. My little guy says, I'm mostly vegan, but I'll eat eggs and stuff and cookies. So yeah, I like that about her. I like that she's letting them choose for themselves now a little bit. But that leads me to this, that's why I say vegan-ish. When somebody says they were raised vegan or they were vegan since birth, I don't really believe that, just because I believe they were mostly vegan. But there's no way, every parent knows this, there's no way you have a lockdown on every single food that goes into their mouth. You know what I mean? So when they go to their grandma's, when they go to a friend's house, even school, I mean, you could kind of monitor that by sending their own food, but they could still eat stuff at school off of somebody else's plate. There are so many opportunities that could just slip in there, and people they underestimate this. They underestimate the power of animal foods. They don't realize, they don't think much of it. Even the vegans that cheat here and there, they don't think much of it. But animal foods are very nutrient dense. And you could eat you could eat a few eggs every few months or so and still be able to get by, like your bones would develop properly, things like that. You may not be super healthy, but you could still get by like that. So yeah, this is debatable, of course, but this could be the defining factor even for her. And yeah, animal foods, like I said, you're going to get all of the nutrients or most of the nutrients that go in. Everything is bioavailable. There's no guesswork like with plants. It's not like you have to convert things. You have to have other nutrients in place, and all of this, your gut health has to be intact, and all of these other variables have to be perfectly, the stars have to be aligned. It's not like that with animal food. So one egg here and there could be tremendously helpful in ways that you don't even imagine. I want to go over a few more comments she made that I was quite impressed by. She talks about how her friend's husband died of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and she has like this charity, and she asked her for her help, and she was like, no problem, absolutely. And her friend was like, well, you need to understand that a lot of the research being done on this is tested on animals. And so it was no problem. It was no problem for her. There's no question, because, and this is where a lot of vegans seem to get confused about where their attention should lie. Humans matter more. This is without a doubt, you can call it speciesist, whatever you want, but we see time and time again the most irrational people seem to be placing the animals first, and they have a hard time knowing which ones, they want to put them on this equal playing field, like babies and cats, and all of them are exactly the same. No, they are not. This is part of our humanity. This is part of surviving and evolving, and we get together, we work together just like any other species. So going against this is going against your humanity. Next question, she was asked if she thinks everybody could be vegan. And she says, I think there is a survival and there is luxury, and I think that there are two ends of the spectrum, that we as human beings on this planet have always sort of swung on the pendulum between the two things. For the people who kill animals for their survival, there's an entirely different karmic value placed on that. So, yeah, this is interesting because I like that answer. And what she's saying is, like, luxury is eating, massive amounts of meat. And I've seen this too. Like, my neighbors will have these barbecues and they just throw out all this meat. It really breaks my heart because I really value the meat I get. And that's another thing, when you're hunting, when you're fishing, when you're sourcing your animal products through very quality and ethically raised forms, you really value that a lot more. You do not waste any of it. You don't waste it. And it's because you know what goes into this. You know it, and you know how, it's just more nourishing. It costs more a lot of the time, so you're not going to waste there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of vegans would also say, people like me, we don't need to eat meat, though. We could go and we could just move our hand to the left and get the tofu and get the almond milk and get all these other products that, and, I'm not going to get into all that, but we do need to eat meat. And so the people who do need to really value it. I agree there, and not waste. And I'm not for, hunting for sport or anything like that. I think that's gross and unethical. So yeah, she's also logical enough to understand that doing the least amount of harm does not mean going out and buying faux fur and new fake leather and all of this new clothes altogether. She actually doesn't buy new clothes, which is very impressive. I shop, a lot of my clothes come from consignment shops, things like that, because it doesn't make sense to me to go and buy new clothes every time you need something when there are so many, like this overabundance we have here in the West. And that's how anyone who wants to be really sustainable would, treat this. That doesn't mean you can never buy new things. It feels nice every once in a while to go get something new. Sure, but, these vegans who are buying all this new fake leather and whatnot, they're doing more harm because that's putting, that has to go somewhere eventually. When I worked in Haiti and after the hurricane, they would come with dump trucks and just load out on the streets all of these clothes and new stuff. It wasn't just, used clothes that people donated. So yeah, they would have just piles and piles of clothes in the street and piles of rice and all of this. And I would see that and think, oh, it's just so disgusting when you see, like she said, these department stores with just racks and racks of the same new material. It's like, why are we producing more and more stuff? We don't need, we could use a little less. That's pretty cool. I'm going to move on from Summer and look at Joaquin a little bit. And I'm not as impressed with him. People have remarked on how aged he looks for 44, which, I would agree. I mean, yeah, I'd agree. But he has had addictions and, smoked most of his life, so that could explain some of it, I guess. He does seem to have something wrong with his shoulder, and he doesn't comment on this publicly, so it's really entirely up to speculation. Vegan Deterioration has actually commented on his bone structure and how he doesn't look very well developed. But yeah, it could be a few different things. It could be something called Sprengel deformity, and if it's that's congenital, so that happened while, during gestation. It could also be just scoliosis. It could be pectus excavatum, which I think is also congenital. So we know that he didn't become vegan until I think about 10 years old. So yeah, I guess if this is congenital, it would have nothing to do with diet, and it could have something to do with his mother's diet. But I'm not gonna go too deep into this because this could be something that happened, while he was in the womb. And unless scoliosis, I think, develops later. So if it's scoliosis, this could have something to do with diet, I believe. So I do want to talk about this whole family's emotional and mental state. They changed their name from Bottom to Phoenix when they came to America, but they came from a cult called the Children of God, and I think they still were involved here in the States as well when they moved to Hollywood. But this cult is horrendous. This is some disgusting stuff, and it has a lot to do with children, sexual acts with children and molestation, possibly rape. But River talked about this how he was, at 4 years old, he was partnering up with other children and doing sexual stuff, and he regretted it later in life. And I can only imagine the emotional trauma, that this would linger on, even if they got out of this as children. And by the way, this was the younger children, I don't think, experienced this stuff like Summer. But Joaquin definitely was in this as well, but he doesn't talk about it. I mention this because this seems to be a theme among, the elite, the Hollywood, the celebrities. This molestation, this, trauma in childhood, it is a very consistent theme with these celebrities, and I think it explains a lot. I think, they grow up, their only job is acting, pretending to be other people in the world, and they feel like this void they have to fulfill. So they're going to save the world, they're going to believe in all of these things, and they don't have God usually. So yeah, I think it's really heartbreaking, it's sad, and some people would even go into like the MK Ultra, the mind control, and all of this, these conspiracies that a lot of them have a lot of merit if you look into them. But I'm not going to get into that stuff. I'm just talking about what we do know. We do know for a fact that a lot of these kids are molested. And this carries on a trauma that you really couldn't understand unless you'd been through it. So this ties into the cult diets, which Sea Siren Janine has spoken about. I'll look for that video and link it in the description if you're interested. But yeah, there are, diets that most cults use to sort of weaken the mind and spirit, and this is, this is a fact. You can go look up what all of these cults are eating, and so it stands to reason if there were, like, if these conspiracies are true, if there were like entities larger than we can imagine trying to indoctrinate us to eat a certain way, it would make sense that they would want us to eat this way. But furthermore, about the pedophilia problem that is rampant in Hollywood, it is just ridiculous how common this is. And for Joaquin Phoenix to stand on stage and talk about the injustices in the dairy industry, it's mind-blowing to me. Like, why don't they talk more about the human injustices going right next to them, and with their own families, with their own friends? You know what I mean? Why aren't more of them speaking up? As a matter of fact, this makes me think of when Corey Feldman came out and he was talking about this in front of Barbara Walters. Her response was literally, "You are tarnishing the reputation of an entire industry." That was her fucking response. It makes me sick. It does. It makes me sick because it shows what they care about, the reputation. Just like with veganism, they care about the reputation. They're not listening to these ex-vegan stories and really hearing them. They care about the reputation as a whole. So it kind of all just ties in together with this whole darkness and diseased way of thinking. Anyway, I've got to wrap this up because I've just realized how long this is getting. But yeah, the whole point is there are reasons people can grow up eating mostly veganish and still develop normally. Or it could just be that they can eat that way and it works for them, which, like I said, I think is few and far between. So yeah, I'll go ahead and wrap this up now. And as I've said, I'll be working on some more lengthy projects, so I may not be uploading as regularly. Y'all have a good day.
So, a lot of vegans want animal products. Like, that's the food you want.